So the first thing we're going to talk about today is just what makes up an instrument track. And we've talked a little bit about this in the past, the different track types. And I've said, yeah, it's a MIDI track with an Aux track. And the other day we kind of like had some, talks about that on Zoom and stuff like that. So I just want to confirm about this MIDI tracks, Aux tracks, instrument tracks, and how all these things work together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Pro Tools. I'm going to make a new session here. In here I'm just going to call this one MIDI Part 2, and make sure down here. Oh wait, let me get this thing going on, and also let me get one more thing going on here while I'm thinking about it. That is the keycaster. This thing here. There we go. Okay, so in Pro Tools down here, I want to make sure my I/O settings are set to stereo mix, interleaved, location is fine, wave file 44.1. Yep, that all looks good. I named it up top. Yep, MIDI Part 2. Cool, hit create. And it's going to create this. Now remember, yesterday in the last lesson, we set up our click track. We set it up so every time we open a new session, our click track is going to show up here. And this should be, yep, there we go. So we've got this sound here. I'm just going to turn that volume down there a little bit, so it's not super loud. And we can hear, there it is. We got a click track. It's the sound I want. It's my Tony click. So we are good to go there. All right, so let's go ahead and set up a couple tracks here. I'm going to set up 3 tracks. I'm going to set up a stereo aux track. I'm going to set up a MIDI track. I'm going to set up a stereo instrument track. So I've got these 3 tracks here. You can see I've got a stereo aux, a MIDI track that doesn't allow you to select stereo or mono because MIDI does not have any audio on it at all. And then I've got a stereo instrument track here as well. And here I'm going to drag this one up. I want my MIDI track to be first, actually. And it doesn't really matter. That's how I like to have it. That's how I like to see it on my screen. So I'm going to hit create. And now once I've done that, you can see here are my 3 tracks that I've created. And the reason why I've created these 3 tracks is I just want to demonstrate to you what's actually happening here and going on. Before we keep moving forward though, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and view my instrument view. Now the instrument view is under, we can go up to View, Mix Window Views, Instruments. Here, right here, View, Mix Window Views, Instruments. Or if you look down at the bottom of my screen down here, this little button down here in the bottom, it says it's our Mix Window View Selector, Mix Window View Selector. I click on that and it pulls up this list of things that I can look at on my mix window. And you can see here I've got inserts A through E, sends A through E, meters and faders, I/O, track color. I can turn on my EQ curve if I wanted to, which would show my EQ, kind of like Logic does. And then here I've got my instrument. I've got some other things here as well. Delay compensation comments. I don't usually turn this on unless I know I have comments. It's not, but my screen's big enough so I could just leave that on. If you're working on a little 13-inch screen on your MacBook Pro, you may want to turn some of these off. It's really up to you. But one thing you can see I don't have turned on right now is my instrument. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on right there, instrument. And that shows me a thing across the top up here. And once I'm done, I can just click away from it somewhere. And now I've got all this stuff on my screen. The EQ curve really is when you have the Avid EQ on here. So you can have that in there if you want or not. I'm actually going to turn it off now just so I can make sure I've got plenty of space on everything else down at the bottom and the top. So right now I've got my instruments view here. And you notice that it's only showing up anything on my instrument track. And that's how that works. It's only going to show you stuff on the instrument track itself. I'm just going to adjust my screen size here so I can see this. Oh, you can't even open Pro Tools. All right, well, let's talk later in Zoom, and hopefully we can get that fixed here. Today we can help you with that, Edward. All right. So what we've got here is this MIDI and Aux thing here. If I go look at my notes, I want to show you what's going on here. So we have a MIDI track and we have our Aux track here. And this is actually the old school way of doing stuff in Pro Tools. Back when I first started using Pro Tools with version 5, once they added instruments into it where you could actually have plugins inside of Pro Tools, which was not version 5.0, it was like version 5.5 or 5.9 or something. I don't really remember. Once they added it in so you could have instruments inside of Pro Tools, the way you had to do it was actually through a MIDI track and an Aux track. You actually had to create both of these in order to get your Pro Tools instruments working. And what you would do is you would create your Aux track and your MIDI track. And on my Aux track, I go ahead and I insert an instrument on here, any kind of instrument. So let's go ahead and get, let's get battery up and running, because I don't really need to have it going quite yet. I think it has time to load in its sounds. If it's not, because I don't really use battery, so yeah. So it's going to go ahead and scan that. And while it's scanning that, and it's like, you know, checking out all the different libraries I've got, that's battery there, and that's a drum machine is what this is. This is basically a drum machine. It's a drum player. It plays samples. It's part of the Native Instruments Complete package. So if you have Complete, you do have battery. And if you don't, you can take a look at it today. I'll show you some stuff on it, like just show you me using it a little bit, and you can decide, oh yeah, I want to use that, or I don't want to use that, or whatever. You know, it might be something fun to have. So anyway, there's battery right there, and it's on this Aux track. Now, if you remember, Aux tracks just pass audio through. They don't actually record any audio, and just putting this battery on there has not changed what it actually looks like on my edit window here. It still is just like any other Aux track. It doesn't show us clips, it just shows us automation. And this is really important to understand. It's not going to change what we're actually looking at on our screen. We don't actually do anything on the Aux track. I'm going to give this Aux track a name, MIDI drums, boom, there we go. And it doesn't actually change what we're looking at on the Aux track, which is a little bit confusing. It's kind of weird, but that's how it is. Where we're actually going to do all of our playing is on the MIDI track. So in order for this to work, we have to actually utilize two tracks at the same time. Now, you might be saying, wow, Tony, that seems kind of confusing. It seems a little bit weird. And I would agree with you. It is kind of confusing and it is weird. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change the name of this Aux track so it's a little bit less confusing for me. I'm going to call this drums in, I guess. I don't know. I don't really use Pro Tools like this anymore. I'm just showing you what I would, you know, how the old school way to do it was. And on my MIDI track, I'm going to call this one MIDI drums. There we go. Boom. So anything I want to program is actually going to be done on the MIDI track. All the sounds that I'm hearing are going to be done on my Aux track here. And so what I can do to that end is, you notice how I've got my plug-in here, my instrument is right here. Always put your instrument first. Don't put your instrument down here somewhere. Put the instrument first. And then what happens is, after the instrument right here, I can put other plugins on here and I can affect the sound of my instrument, just like you would on with a normal Aux track. So in here I could put like an EQ. So let's go ahead and put the EQ 7 band in here. And I could put like a compressor in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the BF76. And we can see these things kind of pop up here as I'm going in. Any sound we have is going to play through both of them. Let's just see. Have we loaded? Oh, it starts over when I close it. Oh, it's faster though. Oh, but it stopped scanning. You know what? Never mind. I'll show you all battery another time. I need to open that up and just let it go. I'll do that during Zoom. Remind me to do that during Zoom. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close that out. And we're just going to use Kontakt. The reason why I'm kind of struggling with my drums here a little bit is because I actually do not use third-party software for my drums. I use Ableton Live Drum Rack. So, and you'll see once we get into Ableton Live, that's what I use is the drum rack. I don't use other stuff for my drums too much. So let's go to factory selection here. And if you did download your factory your free stuff from Native Instruments, then you will have this stuff. Let's see here, urban beats. I don't want urban beats. I want, let's see. I want to just see what kind of drums I've got here. Hold on a second. Let's see. Close that. Drum selection. There we go. Yeah. Well, yeah. Let's get this here. Minimize kit. Analog kits. Digital kits. What's in here? Okay. Well, I'm gonna use a production kits. Let's see what we got. Dubstep, disco, vinyl kits. All right. Use analog kit, and I wish they would just have something in here called 808 or 909, but they don't, so whatever, we'll just load that one up there. Okay, so I've got this drum kit loaded up. Now, if I want to play this drum kit, if I'm playing stuff, let me go ahead and show you my keyboard here. There we go, my keyboard there. And if I want to play this drum kit, you can notice that nothing's happening if I click on my drums here. And if I click over here, again, nothing is happening. And if I hit this, you can see I'm getting some signal here, but still nothing's actually happening here. We're not hearing any sounds. So in order to make it so we can hear sounds, what I have to do is I have to connect my MIDI track to my Aux track. And the way I do that is I go to my output of my MIDI track. The purple track is the MIDI track. I go to my output here. And when I click on it, you can see any plugins that I have in my session, any instrument plugins that I have in my whole entire session are going to show up here. Let me just illustrate that real quick. I'm going to make another Aux track here. And I'm going to call this one bass. And in here, I'll use Kontakt again, because you guys, if you have downloaded the Native Instruments stuff, you will have access to this. And I didn't download the Pro Tools stuff because I just don't want to take up the space on my hard drive, but maybe I will later. So in here, the factory selection here, let's get a synth. Let's get a bass, monster bass. It was the bass, it was the monster bass. All right, so here we got this here, it's bass. Now if I go back over to my MIDI track, check this out, on the output of my MIDI track. Now I can show both of my tracks here. So I can control either one. It doesn't make sense to have one MIDI track controlling two different instruments, and you can't control them both at the same time. You can only control one at a time. But, well, actually, that's not true. I probably could force it to control here. Hold on a second. Let's just see. Can I use the old way to do this was have it set to this one, and then go in here and have it set to this one as well. Wait, there's a way. I think it's control. Yeah, if you hold down and control, you can actually force it to control two things at once, which is kind of cool, but not useful for now. All right, so what I would do is I go to my output here and I select which one I want to control. Let's control our drums. And now when I hit some notes, there we go. There we go. You can hear my sounds in there. Do I have any other sounds? Just these sounds right there. Cool. All right. So that's how that's set up. Now let me just go through this a little bit more one more time. I'm going to change this to none. On our input side, the input in this case is not input that's coming from audio. It's input that's coming from our whatever we have connected up to our computer. In this case, it's going to be this Arturia Lab here. If I had, well, I actually do have more things connected up. Why is that not letting me? Hold on a second. Let's see. What do we got here? Set up MIDI input filter. Not you. Sorry. Set up MIDI devices. Interesting. And if I go to my output here, let's go to this here. Boom. Oh, okay, over here, right. So this is where this shows up. So if I go to all and I go to predefined, in here we can see I've got a whole bunch of options here, things that are plugged into my computer right now. I could actually, you can see here's my Arturia Mini Lab MK2 and my USB KeyStation 88ES. That's because I have two different keyboard controllers connected to my machine. And if I wanted to make it so my drums were coming from this one here, and my bass was coming from my other keyboard, I could actually set that up so I can limit what's controlling stuff. But we're not gonna get into that right now. Right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and let's turn this down so it's not, there we go. Cool, there's that, let's turn the release up. Awesome. All right, cool. So we got this sound here. It sounds pretty good. And you can see it's going through here. I can make it, I could go in here and I can adjust some things. Let's turn the input down. It looks like it's really like super loud. There we go. Keep that like that. And bring this one up here a little bit. Awesome. Turn this input down a little bit so it's not clipping. There we go. And we can go in here, we can, go in here and make some changes to things. Cool. Okay, so we got some EQ stuff going on here. We got some compression stuff going on here. So you can just see that it actually is affecting things. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and input a little loop here that we can use. And the way I'm going to have to do this, as I explained before, is we have to do it on the MIDI track here. So I'm just going to highlight this MIDI track, and I can Option Shift 3 to make a MIDI clip there. I'm going to double click it to open up my MIDI window. And you're going to notice I'm doing this a little bit differently today than I did it yesterday. Yesterday I was opening up the MIDI window in the bottom of the screen down here. And I want to work with this a little bit differently today. I'm going to actually open up the MIDI window by double clicking on it. And in here, I've got all my notes. I can say here, I'm going to drag this up. There's that one. There's that one. All these different notes in here. Let's use this one here, this kick drum right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and put this in as a straight. Let's make like a little house beat here. And so I'm going to double click this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to make it as loud as possible. Just going to make it all the way up loud. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it out. Like that. So I have it on every quarter note here. Now, you'll notice that my grid is set to, let's just take a look at this. My grid up here is set to 16th notes. And I could change that if I want, but usually when I'm working with this stuff, I just keep it as 16th notes. And again, I have this little button right here, which I can hear stuff or not hear stuff. If I have this button turned on, I'm going to hear what I click on. Hear that? Right? But if I don't need to hear that, which I don't need to hear that, I'm just going to turn that off, and I can highlight everything. I just click and drag across with a box, and I hold down Option, and I go over and I drag it like this. Now, keep in mind, I've got all my my Smart Tool turned on over here in the upper left-hand corner. See that? I've got my Smart Tool turned on. I recommend doing everything, almost everything with your Smart Tool. So if we listen to this, let's go ahead and switch back to my view here. I'm going to make sure that we've got this loop set up. Oh no, it's doing it. Because I opened it up. You get out of here. I don't want you. Let's see. Ugh. Pro Tools. Stop it. All right. I want this one. This is the view that I want. All right. So in here, I've got this set up. Yep, cool. So if we listen to it, we can hear it's got that kick drum happening. Let me mute my click track. Nice, okay, awesome. Okay, now if I want to add in more sounds in here as it's playing, I can just go over here and click on the left-hand side, and I can hear my sounds. And then I can put them in here wherever I want by double-clicking. And then once I've got one in, I can just go ahead and option drag it over to each one. So that's how I can go ahead and make a quick drum beat here. And let's find. All right, I'm just going to put this in here, and I'm going to go ahead and make these louder. Hold down Option and drag it over. All right, so we can hear the stuff. You can just go ahead and put this in like this. This. Okay. So we got a little loop going on there. Now, if I want to, let's just take a look at kind of what's going on over here in our other tracks. So if I go back over here and I go back to my mix window, we hit play, and down here we see a couple things are happening. One is this MIDI track is bouncing up and down, and if I play my keyboard, the MIDI track kind of bounces up and down there. And what's happening is this MIDI track is showing me two things. It's showing me basically whatever I'm playing, like my MIDI velocity here. So if I hit the note really softly, it's going to have a low velocity. We can see that velocity there. If I hit it harder, we can see it's a harder, higher velocity. And you'll notice also it says 0 to 127, and that's because that's what MIDI numbers work on, is 0 to 127. That's your velocities. But over here in the drums track, we're actually seeing our level happening. We're hearing stuff happening. And if I want to mute this, I can mute this one here. It's going to stop playing the sound. If I mute this one, it also, we stop hearing anything, but that's because it's no longer sending the signal over to my drum aux channel here. It's a little bit different in how they're working. In this one here, we're still getting signal happening, but it's just muting the output of the track. So you can see here the compression's still working. Right here, the compression's still working. You can see the compression still working. Over here, if I hit this, the compression stops working because we're no longer sending signal. Okay. So you could mute, if you're doing it like this, you can actually mute in a couple of places. All right, so that's how this stuff works. So just one more recap here. On my MIDI track, I set it up, and the output, I click it to go over here to whatever instrument I want it to go to. In this case, I want it to go to my drums, channel 1. And then on my aux track here, I've got my drums on here, I've got my Kontakt in here, that's my drum instrument, and then I've got my EQ and my compression right there. So let's do the same thing, but let's do it on an instrument track. I'm gonna actually, let's just move this bass track over here for a second. We don't really need this there. So let's just take a look at this instrument track. The instrument track, if we look at our notes, what happens is that the instrument track is literally just a MIDI track and an aux track combined into one place. So over here, the MIDI track is here, the aux track is here, and we can see this bass is connected to this instrument that's right here. We make that connection. Well, The instrument track is literally they just took the MIDI track and the Aux track and smashed them together. And what we're looking at is this part up here is your MIDI part. It's the MIDI track stuff. And down here is your Aux track stuff. So if we go back and we look at Pro Tools, up top, all of this information right here is literally just this section of stuff right here. So the input and the output, what I showed you here, is right over here. And this level here, which is a meter, it's a MIDI level. It's right here under volume here. And this pan is also a MIDI pan. All this stuff is MIDI stuff. This is MIDI mute right here. This is all MIDI information here. None of this is audio information. But then if I put Kontakt on here, it connects up to this right here. It just connects it right there. So what I can do is I can go here and I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go down to Instrument. I'm going to grab my Kontakt. And in Kontakt, I'll load up the same stuff. My drum selection. Here, let's load up a different drum kit so we just have some difference here. And now in here, we notice that what happened was it automatically made that connection for us. Automatically, Pro Tools connected this instrument section to this instrument here. But if I click on this, notice how it shows me all of my different instruments that are in my session right now. All the different instruments that are in my session, it shows me here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a name. Let me give this track a name. Instead of instrument 1, let's call this one Drum Kit 2. So now when I go up here and I look at what track it's on, it says Drum Kit 2. And it's showing me that it's on Drum Kit 2. That's what it's selected right now is Drum Kit 2. So if I hit the record button down here, right, it's playing my sound. It's actually playing my sound very, very loudly. I'm going to turn this down. I don't know why that is suddenly so loud. There we go. I think that's what was happening the other day. I think there's something. Oh, I bet I know what it is. I think it's one of my I think it's from one of my keyboards. I think it has a broken data wheel on it. Here, let's do this, just in case. I think that may have been what happened yesterday with that super loud sound, because it seems to be happening here too. So let me go over here and go to my MIDI input filter and turn off the volume here, all except volume here. So what I'm doing is I'm forcing Pro Tools to listen to everything or record everything except for volume here. So that one should be filtered out now, so hopefully it won't break our ears again. All right, so I have this here. Now, if I want to, I can take this MIDI clip here and I can just drag it down to this track here. Let's listen to it. It's playing stuff for us. And this is how MIDI works. MIDI doesn't know what sounds it's playing. It's not that smart. It doesn't really understand what's going on. It just says, I'm playing this note, and I'm playing this note for this long and at this time. If I drag this MIDI clip to different tracks, I can get it to play these different, like this, right? Now let's say, for example, let's say I like the kick drum and everything from this track, but I don't love this snare drum here, that snare drum right there. Well, what I can do is I'm going to copy this down here like this by holding down Option and dragging it down. And what I'm going to do is this one here, I'm going to get rid of these notes here. I just click on the piano keyboard and I can hit delete. And I like that hi-hat and I like that hand clap. I don't need that one. Let's just listen to what these sound. What is this? That's not a bad kick drum. I'm just going to delete that for now, though. And let's go ahead and I'm going to move all these over like this. So now cool. So what I'm doing is I'm getting sounds from two different drum kits here. One drum kit is on my instrument track, drum kit number 2, and I've got my first drum kit over here on my Aux track here. And what I can do is I can just, let's pull over this EQ and this compressor. Cool. All right, so I've got these different drum kits on these two different tracks. One is on my Aux track here, one is on my instrument track. But everything's working exactly the same. The only difference is with this first setup here, I have to have a MIDI track and an Aux track. Now you might say, Tony, why would I ever use that? And the answer is, you really wouldn't. There are a couple of reasons why you would use that when you're setting up MIDI tracks to control multiple things. And in the instructions from yesterday, it does actually show you to do this, where you have a MIDI track controlling multiple instruments inside of your multi-timbral instrument. And I'm going to show you here, let me show you how to set that up in Kontakt real quick, because it goes through the instructions on how to do that in Expand, which is the instrument that comes with Pro Tools. I don't have Expand on this computer, so let me just show you real quick how to do this in Kontakt. What I'll do is I'll have a couple of MIDI tracks here. Let's have 3 MIDI tracks, and I've got over here Kontakt, and let's just call this one Kontakt. And I'm going to set up Kontakt as a multi-timbral instrument. So I've got a bass here. Let's go ahead and bring a drum kit in here. And I'll bring 2 drums in here. I got that one, and I've got this one here. The same ones we've already got in our track here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one bass. Oops. MIDI bass. And this one here will be called MIDI drum kit 1. And this one here will be MIDI drum kit 2. So I've got them named here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect these up inside of Kontakt. Now let's just open up Kontakt and take a look at what we're going to be checking out here. I just closed out my browser, so we're not looking at the browser. And in Kontakt, here, let me minimize this so we're not looking at everything. Well, hold on, we want more than that. Actually, this is okay. So in here, see how each of these instruments has, it looks exactly the same up in this section here. Right here, this section here looks exactly the same for each instrument. Down here, and here, and here. There's my bass right there. Well, in here, you want to go into your MIDI channel right here. So MIDI channel port 1, port A rather. So this one here will be number 1. This one here will be number 2, MIDI channel 2, boom. And then down here is MIDI channel 3. And that plus groups part, you can just kind of ignore that. That's not really important. And now, what we're going to do is we want to connect up these things over here into the same MIDI channel. So I just go over here and I say we're going to go to, let's call this one Kontakt multi. So this first one here is going to go to Kontakt multi channel number 1, because I want that to be my bass. The second one here will be my drum kit number 1. I want that to be Kontakt multi channel 2. And then over here, number 3 here is Kontakt multi number 3. So this one here is going to be all my bass information. This one here will be all my first drum kit information. This here will be all my second drum kit information. So what I'm going to do with these is, I'm going to delete these out so we're not hearing those. And on this track, I'm going to go ahead, Option Shift 3. I highlight it, I hit Option Shift 3. And actually, here, let's do it on let's do this drum kit first. So on here, I'm going to double click it, and I can listen And now everything is coming from the one drum kit inside there. Here, let me just make this kick drums thing real quick. Wait, we're hearing from two different ones. Why are we hearing from two different ones? Oh, it's because it's like plus groups or something like that, isn't it? That's annoying. Kontakt, why do you gotta be difficult? What is this group thing? I don't want plus groups. We're hearing both of our drum kits here. Let me get rid of this one then. Let's load up a different drum kit. So that's what we want there, and this one here is fine, but this one is... They've done something weird with this and probably trying to make it like useful for something, which is just making it more kind of confusing for me. Yeah. Oh, that's annoying. Oh. Well, when they update these things, because this is a new version of Kontakt as well, and I'm not sure if it used to do this or not, because I don't really use a Kontakt like this too much. Well, anyway, let's not worry about that second drum kit then. Let's get another instrument over here. So it's not a drum kit. Let's get a Go to vintage. What do we got here? Contemporary analog. Sure, melody sound. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, so we got this one here, it says A1. This one says A2 plus groups, whatever that means. And then this one down here says A3. So I'm just going to change what we're looking at here, what we've named this. Instead of drum kit 1 and 2, we're just going to call this one MIDI synth lead. And now, if I click on this one over here, stop it. It's my bass. We're playing that drum kit, aren't we? Yeah, okay. You know what, drum kit, you go away. Not sure about this whole groups thing that you're trying to be all fancy with. That's super annoying. We're going to use... Here. I'll use this 50s drummer here, which is not something you guys actually have access to, but it'll make it a little bit easier for me to deal with it because it's not going to have that weird groups thing in there, which I'm not sure what that is. All right, so now A2, we'll set this to A2. So A2 will be our drums, A3 will be our lead, A1 will be our bass. And if I hit play on each one of these, there's that, here's my drums, and then here's my synth lead. Now I hope y'all can understand what's happening here, what's going on. We've got here, all three of these MIDI tracks here are connected up to this Kontakt. So if I open up Kontakt and we look at this, we've got, here, let me just make these a bit smaller. This one here is our bass, this one here is our drum kit, and this one here is our synth melody. And if I click on this bass one over here, it's playing from this top one. If I click on this second one here, it's playing from the second one there, the drum kit, and if I click on this third one, it's playing from that third one there. And if I want to mix these together, let me go ahead and put in some real quick. Okay, so I have that, my kick drum there. Let me go ahead and put a little hi-hat in there as well. Here, let's use this hi-hat. Here we go. Yeah. So I'm just going to drag this over like this. Move this hi-hat to there. Cool. Let me move these down. I'm going to explain about what I'm doing here with some of these things a little bit later. Cool. And how to utilize this stuff and how I'm kind of moving so fast here. Cool. All right, we're going to put this in here. Awesome. Move this down. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to take both of these. I'm going to get rid of these here, every second one, and we're going to load. Just going to drag these over so we have this kind of a slightly different sound. So it's not just this, you know, because this kick drum doesn't really sound good as like a 4 to the floor type of thing. Program a little beat. Cool, yep. Do-do-do-do-do. Okay, cool. So I just programmed that little drum beat there, and now what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll program in a bass line, or I'll play it in rather. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up here, make sure that my bass is set for record enable, and I can adjust my level here. So I can just go ahead and hit play. Record. And adjust my level over here inside of my synth. So you can see everything's coming from this one place over here, and I can adjust it, and I'll go over here to the synth lead and right, so I can go ahead and play that in, and if I hit go, again, go in here and adjust my levels. So it's, you know, this isn't, I'm not, you know, trying to make anything profound here musically. I'm just showing y'all what can be done with this. So you can see how all this stuff works together. I've got these 3 tracks here, and they're going out here into this one Kontakt instrument here. And this is basically a multi-timbral setup here. So this is how this would work. Now, this is really just a good illustration for showing you how all this stuff connects together. I actually don't really work like this in real life, but I do want to show you how all this stuff does connect together, because it's important to understand how routing works in the MIDI world. And really what's happening here is this one's channel 1 right here. The bass is channel 1. It's connected up to our bass here, which says right here, channel 1. And then, oh, there we go. That's what we can push that button. And then our drum kit here is channel 2. So you can see here it says channel 2. And then our synth lead here is channel 3. And you can see here it says channel 3. So that's how we can get all that stuff running between the two. We connect the stuff up between the two. Now, in reality, let me just go ahead and delete all that stuff. In reality, I don't actually like to work like that. I like to have what I call a new instance for every single instrument. And an instance is that plugin. So right now I've got Kontakt in here, and if I there's my Kontakt, and I can go in here and let's make a clip in here. So in here, right, there's that one there, and I'll make that nice and loud and drag this over like this. So I'm going back to my techno beat. Cool. Now for me, if I wanted to add in another drum sound in here, let's just go ahead and put this in and drag this across. Boom, boom, boom. And I'll go ahead and put this one in here. Cool. All right. Okay, so now if I want to add a bass sound in, what I would do in real life is make a new instrument track and call this one bass, call this one drum kit, call this one over here bass. I'll put a little M in front of it to denote MIDI, and in here I'd grab my instrument that I want to use. In this case, let's use we'll just keep running with Kontakt. So Kontakt and same thing would be, what's it called? Factory. There we go. So here I've got my, let's go in here and grab a bass. Are there any bass sounds in here? Bass, bass, urban beats. That's beats, bass. So here we'll use this monster one. There's not that much in here, but it's a little bit of selection. So I've got that one there, and go over here and hit this record button. And so we can just play that in or whatever. And so every new instrument I put in here, I would make a new instrument track. And on that instrument track, I'd put Kontakt in here. And then I would grab some new sound or whatever. So it's in here and noir, pad noir. So now I got this one here. Let's call it pad. Cool. And you can see how quickly you can kind of open this up and start working with stuff once you're pretty used to it here. So I've got a little 8-bar loop. Let's loop that over and now the cool thing about doing it like this is that each track now is its own instrument, and I could put effects and stuff on here. So for example, on this bass line, if I want to make that sound a little bit more interesting, I can put a vintage filter on here. And in here, I can open that up. There we go. And just with adding these effects in, it already starts to sound more interesting. It was really super boring there, and it's still not great, but at least it's more interesting than it was. And we can use automation and stuff like that to kind of mess with these and as the track goes. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But before I do that, let's just go back into our notes. So there you go. You should understand, have a really good understanding by this point of the MIDI, how the MIDI tracks and the aux tracks works together with our instruments tracks there. Now, I want to just talk about Quantize real quick. What this does is it snaps the MIDI or audio events to a grid. We usually use this for MIDI. Traditionally, it's been a MIDI thing. And I want to show this with my bass line that I've got going on. This bass line here is not exactly... Hear how it's like fast? It's a bit off. Right? Well, I can fix that. What I can do is I'm going to double click in here and go in here, and we can see if we look at these, see how the lines are here, and the notes, these notes really should be closer to these lines. See how they're not on the lines? Well, what I can do is I could move them over by hand, grab them and move them by hand, lock them in, and now, right, I could do that. Let me undo all that. Or I can just highlight them and use Quantize. Quantize is under Event Operations. Event Operations, Quantize. There we go. And I just go in here and I hit 16th note. That's fine. Hit apply. Boom. Now let's listen to it. All right. So everything sounds pretty good except for this last one over here is off. So if I deselect it and I click it again and move it, now it'll be fine. Now let's just take a look at that, why that happened. Why did everything sound good except for that last one? And here, let me just show you again one more time. I highlight everything. I hit apply. See how my grid is set to 16th notes here? We'll talk about that in just a second. I hit apply. Boom. And now everything moved. If we listen to it, right, it all sounds pretty good except for this last one. This rhythm is off from what I was hearing before. And what happened was that the way Quantize works is that it locks it in depending on how close it is to one grid line or the other grid line. And we can see in this instance, we're actually closer to the grid line on the left than we are to the grid line on the right. And that's just because I played it really sloppy. So when I hit Quantize, it's going to move this note here to the left instead of to the right. And that's going to happen sometimes. It depends on how good of a player you are, how good of an instrumentalist you are, how badly this is going to turn out. And what you can do is you can either fix it by hand or you can replay it if you want to. So in my case, if I grab all these and I highlight them and hit apply, boom, that one moved to the wrong place, I would actually just move it over by hand like that. There we go. And we got that there, and I just realized actually y'all probably just looking at my keyboard there. Here, let's do that. Cool. Okay. So reading this real quick, Quantize snaps MIDI or audio events to a grid. Events notes snap to whichever grid they are closest to. There are 3 ways to fix incorrect timing. Replay it, fix it by hand in the MIDI editor, or adjust the Quantize grid from 6 to quarters or 1/8 notes or whatever it is. Okay. So a thing right here about notes and timing is that your whole note is a whole, it's a whole measure, a half note is a half a measure, and a quarter note is a quarter of a measure. I didn't realize this for a long time, but these note names, they just come from math. The American nomenclature for notes just comes from math. If you go to England, they have a different note name. Different countries have different names for their notes. In England, it's there's a crotchet. The quarter note is called a crotchet, and then a breve and a quaver and a semi-quaver, and there's all these different names, a breve and a semi-breve and all this stuff. there's all these names, and I forget which is which now because it's been a long time since I've played music in England. But in America, we just call it a whole note, a half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. And this is just really you're just naming how long that note exists in a bar of 4/4 time. So in a bar of 4/4 time, a whole note is the whole bar. In a bar of 4/4 time, a half note is 2 beats, it's a half a bar. A quarter note is 1 beat, that's just a quarter of a bar. Eighth notes are dividing the beat into half, they're just an eighth of the bar. And I don't know why, and maybe I'm just slow, but I never realized this until about, I don't know, like 10 years ago, after I'd been working with music for 30 years. So it was weird to realize that and be like, oh my gosh, that makes everything so much easier. I really recommend, if you're using Pro Tools, to kind of look over this view here, even if you're familiar with how quarter notes and half notes and stuff work, because this is going to show you, the important part on here is showing you how Pro Tools actually numbers things. So an eighth note is not 0.5 or point whatever. An eighth note is actually 480 ticks. And a 16th note is 240 ticks. What are the ticks things? It's a MIDI thing. We don't need to dive too deep into it. It's kind of annoying. Pro Tools is the last holdout DAW that still uses this stuff a lot. Logic and Ableton Live both didn't divide things up by 16th notes, which makes a lot more sense for music, especially modern music. But so we've organized this stuff to the grid. I've done it with 16th notes. Actually, this could be eighth notes. Here, let's undo all this. And if I change this to eighth notes, it's still going to sound good. Yeah, that sounds good. And what I can do also is I'm just going to make sure all these are all legato. They're all connected together. So I'm going to change my duration and set legato to nothing here. Hit boom, apply, and now it's going to make them all legato. Cool, so you can hear how that changes it right there. Let me undo that so you can see what it did. See how these notes are not connected together? And if I hit legato, boom, now they are connected together. And you might be going, Tony, wait, what is that? What is that cool thing you just did? And we're going to come back to this after the break, and we're going to talk about this. These are event operations, and they're awesome. But we're going to do that in the next video after this, all right?